Technologies. Please welcome Josh Fajardo.
There's a clicker somewhere. This one? Great. First off, thanks Steve, thanks MediaPost, thanks sponsors for having me. For me, it's really exciting to be up here and be able to share a lot of work that we're really proud in, and really be able to share how we've been building this brand over the course of the past about 5.5 years. I want to start off with who we are and what we've been doing over the past 5.5 years. As Steve alluded to, we have about 1,800 financial institutions that already have Zelle embedded in their bank apps today, and that allows us to reach 150 million consumers across the US via those banking apps. Ultimately, over the course of the past 5 years, we've already had about 5 billion transactions happen over the network. So as Steve mentioned, there's really a lot of power and a lot of oomph behind the brand. A lot of you already have Zelle, as you can probably tell by the numbers. And what differentiates us as opposed to some of the other brands that are in our peer-to-peer money transfer service competitive set are the fact that since you probably already have Zelle, and any consumer who's already enrolled in the service uses the service, the money moves directly between accounts. So that means, I as a Bank of America customer can send money to someone at Chase without needing to download another app, without needing to wait 3 days for the money to clear or to pay a fee in order for that money to move quickly between our accounts. So that's who we are at a really high level. As Steve alluded to, what is a challenge for the brand, but is also one of our key differentiators and also an advantage that we have. It's the 1,800 different bank apps. So that inherently poses a challenge where our brand experience is baked into the banks. And with 1,800 different banks having Zelle, each bank is talking about the brand. A challenge we have is that a lot of consumers assume that it's for their bank only. So we'll go through some of our core messaging, but that is a huge benefit that we have, all the reach that comes with being embedded in so many bank apps, but it also inherently becomes a challenge when we need people to understand that you can send money pretty much to whoever, no matter where they bank. So building the brand, when we hit the market about 5.5 years ago, we looked at some brands who had been disruptive in their respective categories. Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, these were digital brands stepping into a more conservative, traditional space and being able to make a good amount of noise with the benefit that they were bringing to consumers. So we very much set out to be a disruptive brand, and in order for us to gain any sort of traction in the market, of course, brand awareness was the first thing that we needed to focus on. If people didn't know the name Zelle, and even to this day, a lot of people call it Zelle, which we have to talk about a little too much if you ask me. But brand awareness was the first key metric that we looked at when we launched the brand, and it still plays a part of what we do today. And then how did we start bringing the brand to life? So I have an example here of a placement in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, that starts alluding to something that really works for us, like relevancy, connecting with people in neighborhoods, and appearing in ways that don't seem overly forced, or at least can provide a little head nod to residents, tourists, whoever spends their time there, has been something that's worked for us. So let's talk about what this has looked like over the course of the past 5 years. 2017 was the first year that we launched the brand, and we were only really in market for about 3 months. That meant driving about 21% aided awareness. By year 3, we were at 54. And now year 5, the last measure we took has us at 83%, which is really nice because as we moved through the launch of this brand and building the brand, we always aspired to hit 80, as 80 pretty much makes you a household name. So that's something that we're really excited about, and now I'll take you through some of the examples of the work that's helped us get there. Before I do that, never mind, I'm going to get a little bit geekier on numbers and performance here. So moving beyond aided awareness, I know that this chart is a little bit of an eyesore here, but it's really the nitty-gritty of how we measure success for our campaigns as we launch them year over year. So you have the left-hand column, which is just the overall numbers, and as you can see on the brand metric side of of the table there, we're really looking at everything beyond aided awareness as well, whether it's favorability, it's consideration, familiarity. Will you recommend this brand to other people that you know? And the important thing to call out here is the number of green arrows. The green arrows show that as we continue to move forward in supporting the brand year over year with out-of-home, in particular with the column all the way to the right, we are seeing growth across the board. For me, anytime I see this much green, I'm thanking my team, I'm thanking our out-of-home agency, because they are helping us appear in a way that's really great for the brand in the spaces that we are in. So keep in mind the green here. How we typically get there, I've alluded to it already. We try to be as relevant as we can to time and place, and this is a seasonal creative here that takes a slice of life image from our Zelle family. All of our campaigns are omni-channel. We're typically running about 6 to 10 different channels, depending on that budget each year for each one of the seasons that we're live in. But this is a station domination takeover in Philadelphia, in which we had, I want to say it was altogether about 300 different types of canvases throughout the entire station, and a lot of the messaging was really geared towards holiday travel, since that was a lot that was happening at the time. And I referenced our Zelle family. They are like the heroes in our TV spots, or they have been the heroes for the past couple of years. So we try to keep those worlds merged, and we ultimately, anytime someone sees John and Casey here, we're hoping that they've also seen us in NBA games, NFL games, and a lot of the more traditional cable TV scatter that we do. Here's another example. This one, graduation themed creative in Cambridge, Massachusetts around the summertime. These are the Harvard windows. That is a unique placement to Cambridge. So yes, here's a different example about alluding to what's going on and what's important to the folks in the Cambridge community at this time of year. And then there's other commuter hubs, big placements that we do. Here's another example of John and Casey in this holiday creative at the Charlotte airport. We always want to go big. We always want to be relevant, as I've said. And we look for the unique spaces in each one of the markets to be able to do that. So y'all are probably like, Josh, you're taking us through a bunch of static images that are high impact. How does this relate to digital? Let me tell you about this one time. 2020, we were forced to let go of our best practices. The pandemic hit. Pretty much our key performing channel to build this brand was kind of really handcuffed, because everyone was at home. People weren't traveling. The big like city center takeovers that we were used to doing, like we had to start letting go of. So with this challenge, as folks started to get a little bit more comfortable around summertime to move from market to market, mostly on the road, we started taking our kind of some of our use cases and putting them up in like digital roadside billboards, as you see here. The copy is a little bit different than what you typically see from us, where it just aims to hit on a use case. And with roadside billboards, it's really hard to do a lot of storytelling unless you're going to buy like sequential boards. So we ran this campaign in 2020. It like bucked the trend when it comes to the way that we typically like to appear in out-of-home. And all the green arrows that I was really proud about 3 slides ago really turned into a lot of gray that was not stable data or showed no lifts. So to me, this was really validating in that the stuff that we had been doing it and how we had been doing it is clearly very much effective, because when we swung in the other direction, we were really challenged in not being able to move the metrics as we had in the past few years. So this is my hard truth. I was really down on digital out-of-home. I was like, when we're buying really specific boards along certain routes and we can't kind of lean into our best practices, it's not going to work for us. But as often happens in our industry, we continue to have challenges. So as we've been building this brand, we always take a look at markets that could use a little bit more love in terms of brand awareness and some of the other key metrics that we really focus on. And the Midwest really started shining in terms of lagging behind on awareness. So collectively, we're looking at 12 markets, all for the most part, like I said, lagging behind, which were driver markets and which were, of course, like riddled with these types of boards and placements that we didn't have a lot of success with. So when you couple those three things and the fact that coming out of the pandemic, our budget was a little bit limited, we only had 10% of our usual out-of-home spend. It's like, what on earth could we do here to address this need that's happening with these units that typically haven't done great for us? Working with our agency, Quan Media Group, we really started focusing on what's changed since the pandemic, and we saw the emergence of a lot of new digital canvases, city information panels, more digital mall screens. We had digital signage in concert venues and around some of the arenas that you see here in Cleveland. That was the common thread. Like in the past year or so since we had run that initial campaign, folks were out and about. They were starting to kind of live whatever their new normal was, which meant getting out of the house. So we asked ourselves a few questions. Like when we last did that campaign in 2020, we were looking at dedicated routes. We were looking at dedicated boards that would reach our target audience. The questions that we were asking ourselves is, how do we optimize this buying with 10% of the budgets and more markets? Do we need to stay as focused, like when it comes to the specific boards? How do we start mirroring the new patterns of behavior that our target audience is kind of living their lives through? What were the new screens, and can we tap them in unique ways? And then, is there a world in which we can marry the best practices that I started off this presentation with all these new digital screens? All those questions led us to what ultimately is this test that I'll take you through. We wanted to get after, obviously, digital programmatic, and you've all already heard me talk about creative messaging and how we strive to be relevant. So what ended up happening is we deployed this test. We had, I want to say something like 12 different types of screen formats across a variety of different venues. So you've heard me talk about malls, you've heard me talk about music venues, stadiums, and arenas. We started rolling out our Zelle messaging with the core message that we always want people to take away: send money to friends and family pretty much wherever they bank. So this was kind of like our anchor message that we then started adding more layers to over the course of this flight. We started coming at the Midwest with creative that focused on relationships. Relationships are the anchor of how we like to think Zelle brings joy to people. Once I can send you money and don't have to worry about if you got it, if you need to download a thing, or if you need to wait for it. The idea is that unlocks joy between me and whoever it is I'm sending money to. So we had variations of our core creative here that leaned into relationships, and then there's two colorways, one for daytime, which is our traditional Zelle purple, and one for nighttime, which is white, obviously, here. And the idea behind that was, like, depending on the day part, we want the creative to pop. So we leaned into this version of white that really stood out on the boards. From there, we really started rolling out more wrinkles. So from Game Day Pals to Concert Gals was a creative that ran around a bunch of different event venues, whether it was like Stars on Ice or Halsey or Jim Gaffigan doing comedy, or I think Bieber was touring at the time as well. We were gonna find your venue and deliver that message to you, and all these came in purple, indigo, and white. For airports, we had a specific creative for that as well, from first-time flyers to million milers. That started rolling out around summertime when graduation started happening, and we had some of the holidays like Mother's Day and Father's Day in June. And we continued to layer all of these on. So we have some weekday creative here that did pop in city centers, from your cool boss to your coworker Ross. And that would then ultimately at nighttime flip to kind of, going out to dinner, and then some of the events that would happen in these downtown areas. So you kind of get the gist here, in which we're rolling out these different types of creative dependent on what's happening in the specific markets and what's going on for the time of year. This one's a little bit of a tongue twister, from valedictorians to future historians. That was our college theme creative, rolling out around campuses in the Midwest. And then Steve's heard me talk about this one a lot because I thought this one was kind of cute. For the Kentucky Derby, from spectating brothers to hat-loving mothers. So we were even trying to lean into city-specific creative too, to make that kind of like emotional connection. These are very much, if you've seen our other creative, really aligned with the tone of voice that our brand likes to show up in the world with, which is really distinctly different than just a board that just says like, hey, use Zelle for the road trip. So where did this land us? I will absolutely always talk about the case and relevancy, and the numbers were a really nice turnaround. We don't have the expansive number of green arrows that I had showed you in the past or on the other slide, but when we're talking about a 5% lift in aided awareness, we're really proud of that because our baselines are already pretty darn high, as you saw by that number, that's an 83%. And now the relevancy is also helping us see double-digit lifts in intent, which I think really speaks to that moment in time. Like, if I need to send money and I'm practically living that use case, for us to be there with you, I think is something that's really great for the brand. So yeah, I will always, if we chat later, like we always talk about like the case for relevancy. There were a couple of key takeaways though. I think one thing that I wish like I had communicated more at the onset when we did roll this campaign out is even though we had 12 markets and even though you can buy really efficiently via digital programmatic, our 10% budget was a little bit of a handcuff. Because what I personally would have loved to see here or be able to show y'all, and one thing that we'll ultimately get to a little bit later this year when we do even more digital programmatic is getting to the space where we can show learnings by creative or day parts or different actual events. Because to me, it's a nice story that it all collectively worked, but obviously the next iteration would be to get to the level of understanding how core messaging performs relative to our relationship messaging. So that was absolutely a takeaway and a learning for us, and one that I would love to leave y'all behind with. Like, it's almost like spend more to get more, even from a reporting standpoint, because the data stability was a little bit challenging. But all in all, really proud of this. Excited that we were able to make this work as the landscape started to change a bit. And then also, like, big kudos to our creative agency who just loves writing a whole bunch of little quirky lines of copy, because they work. So I think that's what I have for you all. Cool.
Thanks, Josh. That was a great beginning. Thanks for bringing us inside the thinking behind it and the way in which that strategy evolved over time. Throughout the summit, if you have a question, please raise your hand, stand up so we get to know you, tell us who you are and who you're with, but we have time for questions of Josh. So please feel free, I'll get a mic to you. Yep.
Hello, everyone. Jeff Litwer from Tenuity. A great presentation. Really, a good example of embracing, the channel instead of checking off the box. And not to put you on the spot, but just curious, those lift numbers, like how much work you have done looking at how a lift in awareness or a lift in consideration actually translate into some type of, bottom line business outcome.
Yeah, it's an awesome question because our stakeholders and our CEO at banks often ask us, like, Josh, you're showing us all these improvements in metrics. What does that mean for transactions? And we're cracking that a few different ways. One thing that Steve and I have talked about in the past is like also the fact that the brand is embedded in 1,800 different bank apps really leads to a blocker in attribution, because there's no way for me to tag an actual bank app because there's so many layers of security and complexities, and especially when we're talking about 1,800 different apps. So what we've started to embark on a journey on is like marketing mix modeling. Bayesian in particular is one that we're looking at with our agencies to understand the correlation between what we're spending across each channel, how many impressions, and then the relative changes in transactions from when we are live to when we're not live. So it's a little art and science because our brand is challenged with that attribution inherently by the model, but that's how we're trying to get to it. Work in progress. Maybe if I'm back next year, we can talk about whether that works and how it goes. So great question. Thank you.
Hey, Josh. Ben Abatello with Hivestack. First of all, great presentation.
Thanks.
Not to put you on the spot as well.
Everyone's putting me on the spot.
Yeah. What did you use to trigger some of that creative messaging? Was it exposure via maids? Help me understand that. Like, where did you decide? At what point was the inflection point to say this is the creative? Was it day parted? What was the data you used to fuel that that message?
A lot of the work that we're doing year over year is digging down into what our target audience, we call them connected conductors. They're folks who are 25 to 54, who are influential in their social circles, like really connected with their coworkers, really connected with their families, multi-generational, all that sort of stuff. So over the past 3 years, we've been building really robust profiles around how they spend their times pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and now coming out of post-pandemic. And working with our out-of-home buying agency and a partner like Vistar, it was just mirroring or mapping everything that they're doing over the course of 7 days a week. So it was the day parts, it was this particular profile, understanding. We also were doing heat maps as to how they started kind of spending their day more and more and could adapt accordingly. So that's kind of how we leaned into it, and happy to talk more about the details and nuances. Oh, cool.
Hey, Josh, I'm John Fringakis from Reveal.
What's up, John?
To intentionally put you on the spot.
3 for 3.
Who did you, I guess, two-part question. First one, I noticed that you didn't do unaided awareness. Was there like a thinking process behind that? And secondly, how'd you do the brand surveys? Were they like general market or user targeted, and who'd you use? So maybe 3 parts.
Yeah, you'll have to refresh my memory on the third part. But aided versus unaided awareness, also a question that has come up a bunch via our stakeholders. We've found that there are too many variables beyond our campaign and like our influence when it comes to unaided awareness, whether that is like breaking news that's happening in the category, whether that's a competitive brand coming in and spending 12 times the amount that we are. What we like to see when it comes to unaided awareness is more of a long-term growth trajectory for it, especially when it comes to a metric like top of mind. But we've had tons of conversations. We're pretty aware that it's not a number that I can show you like, hey, this campaign drove a 14% lift in aided awareness, because that would usually require us to spend at the level that the competitor that I'm mentioning spends at, where they're in the market for a really long time with really, really, really high profile placements that end up kind of shifting the attention of folks anytime that they're live. So that's kind of also an inherent challenge for our brand. So that's unaided versus aided. Aided is more easy for me to influence when we're live in the market and when we have our banks also doing some support for the brand. Remind me of the second and third question.
Oh yeah, who'd you use?
To
do the surveys? And I don't remember what the third one was, to be honest. So put me on the spot.
No, it's all good. Yeah, glad to put you on the spot. There's 2 different levels to it. One, we have a kind of channel agnostic partner in Cantor Millward Brown that does on-the-ground surveying via opportunity to see for our traditional channels, but then we're actually tagging digital channels, and so that gives us the overall like picture when it comes to everything that is live, and then we can understand performance by channel and often performance by market with them. But for this particular study, we used M4, who allowed us to understand through like geofencing if you were near a creative or one of the placements that we had live, which I really like a lot. I think there's merits to opportunity to see. But to be able to say, like, yes, that device was near it or not, to me, lends it a little bit more of credibility.
Hi, Andrew Urban, Clear Channel.
Hey.
Hi. So, of course, you had the results. Do you see yourself shifting more money into programmatic at home? And if you are, where would that come from your budget?
Ooh, that one puts me on the spot, because then I think about media mix. We will absolutely continue to do digital programmatic out of home. The ability to buy, optimize, everything that I took you through is very much appealing. The other part of that is frequency as well. To be able to have all the different types of creative and always anchor it with our core. Where would I see that budget coming from? If we talk over a couple of drinks, I'll tell you how I always want to invest more in out of home. Like, to me, that's always a top proven performing channel.
Digital display?
I'm always okay doing a little less digital display, if I'm going to be totally honest. I understand its merits in terms of also reinforcing frequency and its cost efficiency. But the fact that all of us as consumers can get exposed to like 7,000 ads a day, I would argue that I'm more likely to remember an out-of-home ad that's situationally relevant and speaks to me versus the 1,400 banner I might come across as I'm like scrolling through things. So thanks. Yeah, help me answer the question there too.
Josh, I want to draft off a couple of these questions. Going back to the data piece, you don't have the same level of insight to your customers' behaviors, I take it, that, say, some of your competition does, like a Venmo or a Cash App, because you don't have access to all of those banking apps in which they're being used.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That is also inherently a challenge for us, and we have to work really closely with the individual banks like Chase, Wells. Everyone has a really good understanding of whether they have a customer who's active in digital banking but not enrolled in Zelle, someone who has enrolled in Zelle but hasn't sent, someone who sent 3 times and then just never came back. So they're really good when it comes to their first party data and being able to speak to their individual customers, but there's a kind of a bridge that we don't necessarily cross with them as a whole that says like, wow, I can pull from all of your audiences and I can create personas, or I can use first party targeting to only reach people in digital that probably haven't enrolled yet or who have lapsed as users. So yeah, that tends to be a challenge.
I have a question about the creative choices. So for the smaller digital out-of-home ads, you're using mainly words.
Yes.
Tell us about that choice. Now, the larger placements, you're using some of that sort of connection, that the images and the connection imagery, but you're choosing to go with words on the smaller pieces. Tell us a little bit about the thinking about how and why you're making those sorts of choices, and how effective you've seen different creative choices.
Yeah, absolutely. For the big splashy like dominations and everything that I showed that had like that slice of life photography, that tends to have a bit more spillover into just the general market, as opposed to some of our like copy creative, which can be a little bit more focused on our specific target audience, just by nature of targeting. The other idea is also that when we are running, say, like NFL and NBA games, you're getting exposure to John and Casey. So thematically, we would think that like a market like Philadelphia that has seen our ad like during the playoffs will also make the connection when they see John and Casey in like their Subway dominations. So there's a little bit, we go narrow when it comes to the actual copy and try to be like charming and relatable to our target audience, but then it kind of expands out once we get to more mass reaching type of placements. And with bigger canvases too, the photography pops.
And then what's the online and mobile piece to this? Are you echoing these ads in your other platforms? Are you using some methods of trying to retarget people who are in the region? What is the online piece and the mobile piece where you've got them for longer later?
Yeah, there's a couple of different layers to it. With the ability to like geofence and geo-target, retargeting is definitely something that has shown for us when we're talking about trying to hit optimal frequencies. And the same kind of goes for our TV placements when we know that we're going to be in NBA content or like on an NBA game, to then be able to find that consumer later on when they are on Bleacher Report, or when they are just kind of checking out NBA content, to just continuously reinforce that frequency with a variety of different messaging.
And is it working? That's working for you?
Yes.
But how about in terms of the creative? Are you echoing it, or are you using a different strategy online, or that sort of takes the brand awareness and starts directing them towards something a little more performance oriented? Yeah,
we like to think that we're getting people further down the funnel, especially as we move from campaign 1 to like campaign 5. One thing that I push our creative agency on is when we talk about optimal frequency, sometimes it's like 7, oftentimes it's like 10 or 12. I never want to be like in market solely with one message, because God, that'll get so boring and so just drowned out really fast. So one thing that when you see us out there in the world more, you're going to see a variety of different messaging that aims at storytelling, that aims at reinforcing a variety of different brand benefits. What's been challenging in the past couple of years is getting people to understand they can send money to folks wherever they bank. So that's always been such a core piece for us, something that we'll probably reevaluate over the next couple of years.
Josh Fajardo, perfect kickoff for us. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Whew, sweating.